Abu Dhabi. There we go.
Mm,
Abu Dhabi.
mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. That's great.
And lots of South Africa
And
and
I think,
Nicaragua. Oh, we are live.
yes, we are live and
Yay.
alive. Good.
Hello, everyone. We've
Hi,
just been
guys.
discussing where everyone is from. We have so many people from all over the world tonight, or today, whatever time it is in your country. Hello, Philippines.
Cool.
Hello, Lynn. Hi. Let us know if you
Hi.
haven't already. Tell us where you are from or where you're watching from. It's 3 a.m.
Oh
for
my gosh,
Jemima. Wow,
that's so
that's
crazy.
that's dedication.
You're
Serbia. Hi,
amazing.
Sanja. Jemima. Oh, it's 3 a.m. in the Philippines, Alex. 3 a.m. Wow.
Guys, you are our
Thank you
heroes.
guys. That's
Really.
amazing. It's also
Lunchtime
9
over
p.m. in
here.
South Africa, so that's also quite late, but not quite 3 a.m.
Melvin, if it is lunchtime over here, what country are you from? Where are you watching it?
Oh, we have someone from Namibia.
Cool. That's great.
Oh, welcome everyone. Well, it's
Hi,
so great to see
Sadia.
the chat box so active already, and we haven't even
Oh,
started.
Nicaragua. We were just wondering what time it should be in Nicaragua. Cool. Melvin answered our question. So it's the lunchtime.
Oh,
Awesome. Bon
fantastic.
appetit.
Enjoy your lunch while you watch our webinar. So, hello everyone.
Oh,
Welcome to our
Egypt too.
webinar. Egypt,
Yeah.
amazing. How cool. All right, so our webinar tonight is going to be on how to deal with dyslexia and reading challenges, tips for our online ESL classroom. It's so great that you could all be with us today. So let's first get to know our speakers. Hello, Alex. Alex
Hello.
is our NovaKid teacher training lead. So she wanted to quit teaching after her very first lesson. But now she is actually a Cambridge CELTA qualified teacher and teacher trainer with over, wait for it, 15 years of teaching experience and 5 years of coaching. She has mentored over 500 teachers and obtained many professional certificates. So thank you so much for being with us today, Alex.
Thank you so much for such a warm welcome, Tegan. Tegan is our NovaKid teacher, as you probably all already know. She's from sunny South Africa. Now, not that sunny because you have evening, obviously, right?
Yeah.
She has an honors degree in occupational therapy and also works as I learned how to read it properly. Get ready with that. Pediatric school-based occupational therapist. I had to practice that. You're amazing. She also has obtained TFL certification and has been tutoring online and offline since 2017. Tegan has been with us with NovaKids since 2020. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. And let's also say hi to Lisa tonight, who is behind the scenes, and she'll be our moderator. So after the webinar, Lisa will send a feedback form. And if you want to receive a certificate for our webinar tonight, you will just need to fill in that. So let's keep a lookout for that. And remember that as always, NovaKid rewards our active participants. So we look forward to hearing all your thoughts and comments in the chat box tonight.
Exactly. And let's, guys, quickly go through our agenda for tonight. As usual, we have a warm up. Then we will talk about what dyslexia is and what dyslexia isn't. Then we will talk about how to spot it and share with you, and you will share with us some practical tips. That's why we are talking about sharing your ideas and comments in our chat box. And of course, at the end, we will have our usual question and answer session. And for our warm up today, we are going to do a short quiz. Don't worry, nothing crazy. I think you might be enjoying it, hopefully. So let's go with the very first question. Which of these scientists or inventors actually, is believed to have had dyslexia? And we have quite a lot of famous names here. We have Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, Marie Curie. You don't need to put the entire name, just put the letters in the chat box and let's see if you are going to guess it. Let's see. Wow, guys, you are so active. Vanessa, how you could spell so quickly Isaac
Yeah, she
Newton?
even typed out the whole word.
Yeah, that's cool.
Unfortunately, Isaac Newton is not actually the right answer, but there are a few people
Tegan,
saying
don't give it
A.
out too early.
There is someone who typed out Albert Einstein. Thank you, Sadia.
Wow. Sadia, you're
Um,
amazing.
and lots of other C's.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Right.
majority C.
Okay, so let's check. Let's check if we all find the right answer. And indeed, guys, it is Albert Einstein. Can you imagine that? And actually, if I remember correctly, he was even once expelled from his school and labeled as some kind of a challenged child or something because his teachers were considering him like, not smart enough, yeah, to complete the school program.
He didn't fit
Yeah.
in the box.
Absolutely. Let's see now from scientists and inventors. Let's go to actors. Which famous actor has openly discussed his struggles with dyslexia? And we have here a bunch of very famous and very handsome dudes from Hollywood. Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, Leonardo DiCaprio, Johnny Depp. Ooh, my favorite Johnny Depp. Tegan, which one do you like most?
Brad Pitt, for sure.
Mm, I
Although
see.
they all come pretty close. Oh, we've got
Mm-hmm.
lots of answers tonight. It's A,
Uh-huh,
B,
guys, you're
D,
amazing. Cool.
C.
For
I think
those of you,
everyone has got a different answer.
cool. Yeah, yeah, great. Actually, for those of you for whom it is 3 a.m. in the morning, you are super active, guys. Me, 3 in the morning,
Exactly.
it's like absolutely no clue what's going on. Okay, let's
Almira
see.
says Tom Cruise is her celebrity crush.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Okay,
actually, what
we
is the
get you.
answer, Alex?
And the answer is actually Tom Cruise, indeed. From what we know, he even had to hire and still has to hire some people who helps him to read the script of the movies and makes it easier for him because you will get to know it a little bit later. But in fact, dyslexia it's a lifelong issue actually. And the last piece, which famous writer is believed to have struggled with dyslexia? Here we have again a bunch of very famous names: Agatha Christie, Jane Austen, Ernest Hemingway, and Mark Twain. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, we have a lot of for
A, D,
A,
C,
D. Okay, we have a
B.
bunch of stuff here, right,
It's a
guys?
mixed bag.
Yeah, it's kind of hard actually to guess here because, to be honest, we didn't know this fact either when we were preparing
No,
for this webinar.
I actually didn't
Let's see.
know both of these last two questions. So
Yeah,
these were new information.
yeah, we went
C,
actually
D.
for fact checking because we were not sure if it is actually true, in
Yeah.
fact. Okay,
Okay.
ta-da!
A
And
few
indeed,
A's.
yeah, you guys who hate A, you were perfectly right. It's Agatha Christie, no matter how crazy it sounds. But in fact, actually, he was dyslexic, and she didn't have like ghostwriters, but the people who were typing for her when she was dictating her novels. Sometimes she was saying that she was washing the dishes, getting in her memory some ideas about some crazy murders because she
That's
hated
the
washing the dishes.
epitome of being able to multitask as a woman.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And from our fun, hopefully for you, warm up, let's go for something more serious. And Tegan, let's start with what dyslexia is.
All right. So, everyone, let's start to look at what dyslexia is. And it's a very common learning difficulty that primarily affects reading, spelling, and writing. So, children with dyslexia often struggle to recognize and manipulate sounds in language. Its characteristics can vary widely among individuals, but some of the common signs include difficulty with phonological processing. So, this relates to the difficulty in recognizing as well as working with sounds in words. So, for example, breaking words into syllables and then blending those sounds together to be able to read words. So, for example, cat spells cat. They also have slow and labored reading. So often their reading fluency is often affected with dyslexia. They will pause, they'll guess words, or they'll even tend to skip words completely when they are reading. They have challenges with spelling. So their spelling may be very inconsistent and quite phonetically inaccurate. So they may spell things such as a with as wit, They often have difficulties with their short-term memory. So it can make that very hard for them to remember instructions, new vocabulary, or even things such as the many, many English grammar rules. They have difficulty sequencing, so often problems organizing letters and words, or even words in a full sentence. So they might even read or write the word was as saw. And as well as this, they have very inconsistent performance. So these students may perform very well on verbal tasks, but then may struggle with reading and writing tasks. So for our ESL students, dyslexia can make language learning even more challenging. So it's really important that we understand and address their unique needs. So due to the above mentioned difficulties, it's common for our students with dyslexia to often have a very low self-esteem. So it's important that us as teachers use a lot of praise and create a supportive learning environment. It's also important to remember that dyslexia is not a reflection of a child's intelligence. So now we have a question for you. Have you ever encountered students who show one or any of these signs that we have just spoken about?
Let's see. Let's give our audience some time.
And if you're
Okay.
struggling to keep up with the chat, just click refresh so that you are then live with us at the same time. Oh, we have an outstanding yes from everyone.
I haven't seen a no yet.
No, me neither. I
Guys, you've come
saw,
to the right place then.
yeah,
Cool.
definitely a yes from a lot of people. Okay. I think we can agree that everyone has definitely had some experience with children who have these difficulties. So thank you everyone for your answers. And before we hear from Alex about the prevalence of dyslexia, are there any guesses as to what the prevalence might be in the entire population? Do we think it's 1% of people? Do we think it's 5, 10, 15? What do you think? Maybe higher,
Maybe.
20? Alistair
Mm-hmm.
says 15. Prince says
Mm-hmm.
1.
Sadia says
Sadia says
2.
2.
20% from Christine. Okay, we
Ooh,
have
quite
various
quite high
answers.
numbers. A lot of people are saying 25% or 20. Hmm, sure. Melvin is saying 50. That's quite a high percentage of people.
That's true.
Okay, so we do,
35. Okay.
yeah, we have a range from 1 to 30. Alex,
Mhm.
tell us, what is it?
Sure thing. So, in fact, guys, dyslexia is definitely more common than a lot of people think. It's estimated to affect about 5 to 15% of the entire population. However, these data are depending on how it is defined and diagnosed. It occurs across all languages, across all cultures and backgrounds, which actually shows that it is not linked to intelligence or educational opportunities, as Tegan has also mentioned just right now. However, the way dyslexia shows up can vary depending on the language. For example, in languages like English, which has tricky spelling rules, dyslexia often looks like trouble with reading and spelling. In languages with more consistent spelling, like Italian or Spanish, it might show up more as slow reading or struggles with fluency. For example, a child learning how to read in Spanish may understand the sounds associated with letters, but still struggle with reading quickly or fluently due to the efforts it takes to decode each word. At the same time, in languages with more phonetic consistency, dyslexia can affect how quickly someone processes written text rather than how accurately they spell words. So they might be having actually demonstrating excellent reading skills and having no problems blending, but it will be very hard for them to realize what is going on when it comes to the read piece of the text. And furthermore, dyslexia isn't always identified early, especially when children are taught languages with more regular spelling patterns or when they are learning in multiple language environments or multiple languages. This can delay intervention and support, particularly in multilingual environments. It's also important to note that dyslexia can be lifelong. We have already discussed it when we were talking about our famous people having dyslexia. But with the right support, people with dyslexia can learn to manage their challenges and succeed both academically and professionally, which again, we have just right now demonstrated for you. So now back to you, Tegan.
Great. Okay, so let's now look at some of the challenges that our students might face. So these challenges are often amplified because our students are not only grappling with one set of rules, they're grappling with two, those of their native language and
Yep.
of the new language. So in our ESL classroom, dyslexia may actually present as they struggle with pronunciation. So, difficulty firstly identifying the phonic or the sound itself, and then also replicating unfamiliar sounds in a new language. They may have challenges learning and memorizing new vocabulary. Again, because of the really poor short-term memory, their ability to retain and recall words might be difficult, and especially so if there's not a direct equivalent of that word in their native language. They also have slow progress in reading and writing. So their ability to learn the alphabet, the sounds, and then being able to write it in a non-native script can take a lot longer. And they may then also have a lot of reversals of the letters or omissions completely. They may have difficulty with grammar, again, because of their poor short-term memory, a difficulty remembering all the grammar rules is difficult. And they also rely a lot on the context. So they may heavily rely on context to be able to guess the meaning of words. For example, when you're learning sounds and the picture is a little bit ambiguous, they might guess the word based on the picture and not actually the sound. So, for example, if it's of a girl jumping, they might, and the sound is j, they might actually just say girl instead of being able to understand that you're trying to learn the sound j. And as well as this, they have difficulty with sound blending, probably the most common one that we see in our lessons. So difficulty identifying the phonic, the letter sound, and then being able to blend those together to be able to read words, which is what we call our sound blending. So sometimes these struggles can be mistaken for a lack of language ability, but often they're really symptoms of dyslexia. It is, however, very important to remember that not all children who struggle to read are dyslexic. You can have one or many of these symptoms or signs and not have dyslexia. And it's also important to remember that dyslexia can look different in our multilingual students. So let's approach it with a lot of flexibility and understanding.
When you said that, Tegan, it got me thinking that literally every second student I have ever I have ever taught was dyslexic. Let's guys answer in the chat box. Do you guys think that so many students have dyslexia, diagnosed or otherwise, or maybe there can be other reasons for English learning difficulties? Maybe something else can actually prevent your students from learning English effectively. Share in the comments. Let's see.
Because as we've learned, it's not always dyslexia. If only 5 to
Mm-hmm.
15% of our students have dyslexia. Ah, Mandisa, ADHD, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right. Autism, yeah, could be that one too. Absolutely. They are
Yeah,
scared or shy, definitely. It's like that
yeah.
affective filter that comes into action when the student doesn't feel comfortable in the class, no matter how they want to learn, they will not be able to perceive anything. Right? Good.
Sadia says
Mood.
mood. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's such a good one. Yeah, having a bad day.
Absolutely.
Exactly. We have those too.
Yes. Sometimes us teachers have the same problem, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
They are tired from
Uh,
school. Absolutely.
yeah, the time that they take lessons can also impact so much on their
Mm-hmm.
progress in classes. If they're only having lessons at their 9 o'clock at night, it's going to make it
Mm-hmm.
very difficult for them to retain anything that is learned. Lack of sleep, exactly. The time of the lesson,
That's true.
doing too much.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Ah, Shura. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but different learning styles. That's such a good point. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Not all
Cool.
children learn in the same way.
And I like Zaira's comment about not being able to review the lesson for retention or parents' influence, that like the mom answers the question. Yeah. For many children, it's not that much of a support, but actually preventing them from actively participating in the class, right? Mm.
Yeah, exactly.
Jessa talks about native language tonation. In fact, actually, mother tongue can influence greatly how they perceive another language. Awesome, guys. Fatigue, cool, guys. You spotted so many ideas that actually indeed can come into action when it comes to our students learning English. Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Overpowering parents. Yeah, our favorite helicopter
Definitely.
parents, right?
Yeah.
What would we do without them? Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Guys, you shared a lot of ideas for us. Thank you so much. So, in fact, actually, when dealing with the students from different language backgrounds, we may often mix up the challenges of learning English with signs of dyslexia. For example, when it comes to spelling, English spelling can be tricky because the same letters or groups of letters like OUGH in though, thought, through are pronounced differently. Even now, when I'm pronouncing them, I'm literally playing it in my head first and then saying it because for me, it's something to focus on, even though I don't think that I ever displayed any signs of dyslexia. It is confusing for anyone, but it's actually a normal part of learning English, not necessarily a sign of dyslexia. Then we have the next one, word order. English sentences may work differently from many other languages, so learners might make mistakes when putting words together in the sentence. Again, can be mistaken for dyslexia, while in fact it's just one of the learning stages. And last but not least, and I think the most terrifying for many of us, those who have been learning English, had this kind of experience pronunciation. Learners whose native languages, for example, lack certain sounds, such as the English sound the or th, may mispronounce words simply because in their language this sound doesn't exist at all. For example, they might say tree instead of three, yeah, or something else. So it could be mistakenly seen as decoding issue rather than actually a natural linguistic transfer error. These above mentioned learning challenges are all natural part of learning a second language, but they are sometimes mistaken for dyslexia. The key difference, guys, is that dyslexia shows up in all the languages someone speaks, not just a new one that they are learning. So it is important always to look at the bigger picture before jumping into conclusions. However, good thing here is that all the tricks and all these strategies you're going to use for dyslexic students are going to work for those students who simply struggle with learning English as their second language or third or whatever. And basically, to sum up, we can say that reading is hard. We have
Yeah.
prepared for you some fun activity, and sorry, Tegan, I will use you as a guinea pig today. What
All
we wanted to
right.
show you, we wanted to show you that actually the language environment where the student comes from may influence greatly how they can perceive English. For example, English and French both share the same Latin alphabet. So if you are capable of reading in English, most probably it will be easier for you to perceive the French alphabet because they simply use the same symbols. Tegan, you need to a little bit brush up on your French reading skills. Let's try to read this sentence.
And in bearing this in mind that we have practiced this and I cannot
Yeah,
remember how to say it. So
it's okay.
I'm gonna read it as I would read English. I would say j'ai des pommes.
Very close. J'ai des pommes. Anywho, this is
Okay.
great. Yeah, there are going to be certain spelling or actually in this case reading rules, yeah, that come with French, but overall you see familiar symbols. So it's a little bit easier for you to actually start putting the symbols together and then decode this word and then actually start pronouncing it. When it comes to, for example, languages that use a different type of alphabet, it's going to be way more difficult. For example, Ukrainian uses not Latin, but Cyrillic alphabet. Indeed, you do see probably some of the symbols that are the same or look similar to the English ones, right? Tigan, do you see anything familiar for you?
There's a Y, there's some E's, and there's a backwards R and a K
Mm-hmm.
and an A.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay, cool. Do you think you can try to read it?
Not a chance. I mean, maybe that middle word, mehe,
Mene.
maybe.
Mene. That H stands for N in Ukrainian. Umene.
Wow.
У мене є яблука. Anywho, it's still not that scary. That's why it's actually easier for the students whose alphabet is Cyrillic to grasp the English alphabet because, yeah, your G is our D, but anyways, it kind of looks the same. Some similarity are there. And now we have Hebrew. And any chances we might read it?
Not a
Yes?
chance.
Me
Just pretty
neither.
symbols.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something totally different. And now imagine the student who comes from this language background, how hard it is for them to grasp English alphabet, English symbols, because there are literally no similarities at all for them to draw the connections. No cognitive connections are easily formed when they are learning English alphabet. So,
Exactly. Yeah. So, from what we have spoken about so far, I think we have a good understanding of what dyslexia is. It's also important to remember that dyslexia is not something that a person will just outgrow, and it is unrelated to a person's overall intelligence or their creativity. So let's look at some things that dyslexia isn't. So it isn't a vision problem and isn't caused by poor eyesight. It isn't laziness or a lack of effort. It is a brain-based difference in how language is processed. It is not caused by poor teaching, lack of exposure to language, or a non-supportive home environment, although these factors might affect learning, but are not the root cause of dyslexia. While dyslexia primarily affects reading and language skills, it can also impact other areas like organization, time management, and memory. But again, these are secondary effects rather than the core symptoms. And it is not a disease or a disorder. It is not an illness that requires treatment in the medical sense. It is just a different way of processing information that requires a tailored educational support. So, in saying all of this, it is not our job as an ESL teacher to ever diagnose or label our students. However, being able to recognize the signs and symptoms will enable us to not only understand our students better, but also tailor our lessons to their specific needs. And as we mentioned earlier, not every child who is struggling to read or sound out words is dyslexic, but we can apply the same teaching strategies to that child to help them in our ESL classroom. So let's take a quick look at a practical example. We have a sentence here. The little dog ran fast to catch the red ball. So based on your experience at NovaKid, what level in NovaKid terms can a student read the sentence confidently? Is it level 0, level 1, level 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? What do
mhm.
you think?
Rowena was the first one, the fastest, level 2.
Level
Cool. Thank you,
2.
Rowena.
Gerald
Awesome.
saying 1.
Uh-huh.
Hayren saying 2. Vanessa saying
Cool.
3. Okay, lots of
Uh-huh.
level 2s, some specific on level 1, unit 6.
Cool.
Some level
Level 1,
3s.
unit 6, we even have one answer like that.
Level 1 with really good reading skills. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a good good to elaborate a bit more. You can definitely get that. All right, I'm gonna say most of our teachers have probably said about level 2. Okay. So Alex, if our student is at level 2, how old do you think they should be?
If
What
we
do you
talk
guys
about
think?
general terms, probably like 8, 9 years old, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah. Do you guys agree? What? 7, 8, 8, 9? Yeah, okay. Our teachers are saying about 8, 8, 9,
Mm-hmm.
8, 9,
Mm-hmm.
7 to 9. Okay, we're in the same age bracket. But now, what if our student is from Israel? How old do you think they should be, or they would be, when they can read this sentence? Do
Probably
you
way
still think they're going
older.
to still be 8 or 9?
I would say 9, 10, sometimes even older.
Wow. Audrey says 13. Jackie says 10. A lot of
Uh,
tens, 10 to
yeah,
11.
I did experience once I was observing the lesson with one kid from Israel. He was 12 and he was actually struggling with reading. The teacher
Even
was
at 12.
literally, yeah, helping him with
Wow.
blending sounds. It was hard for him.
Yeah, okay. So I think our teachers have definitely experienced that. For example,
Hmm.
our students from Israel are often a lot older when they can then start to read. So this is why our expectations for our students are so important because so many factors can influence their language learning journey. So Alex, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
With pleasure, guys. In fact, expectations for reading skills can vary a lot depending on the country and its educational system. In some places, like in the US or in the UK, children are expected to start learning to read as early as age 4 or 5. So, of course, by age 6, many are expected to read simple sentences like the ones that we just showed, the one that we just showed you. Meanwhile, in countries like Poland or Israel, formal reading instructions often start way later, around age 7, sometimes even later, based on the belief that children benefit from more time to develop readiness skills. In this case, not reading skills, but readiness skills. More focuses on soft skills or maybe social skills, and for them, just simply to learn how to behave in the school environment. And in fact, actually, the differences don't stop here. Languages with more consistent spelling, like Italian or German, usually expect children to master reading faster than those learning English, which has a lot of irregular spelling rules. French, I think, also can be added here because, indeed, even though you can say 4 sounds but write 8 letters, but you once in your lifetime just remember this combination, and it's always like that. So even if you don't know the word, you can easily read it, and the number of exceptions is very small. All these variations, they can lead to the confusion when comparing children of the same age but coming from different language environments or educational systems is going to make actually us bring us to a trouble. That's why, according to the prior knowledge guide developed by Novakit methodologists, we can cater for both very young learners age 4, 5 and young learners age 6, 7 with zero reading skills. Each group can be taught blending and later on reading skills at level 0 for very young learners and level 1 for young learners. If you are not sure what your expectations for each specific student are, then check with the prior knowledge guide to determine where they should start. And now, finally, let's take a closer look at some examples of how students can struggle with reading, and we will discuss the solutions for that as well. We will watch now, guys, the first video. Let's imagine that our student is 5 years old and the student is at level 0. Think about 2 questions and answer them in the chat after watching the video. What the student is struggling with and what the teacher is doing wrong. Ready? Let's go then.
Okay, Alex, say jacket,
Jacket,
jet,
jet,
jump.
jump,
Good. Again, jacket,
jacket,
jet,
jet,
jump.
jump.
Good. You try.
Mm, sweater.
Okay, jacket.
Oh, jacket.
Good.
Plane.
Jet.
Oh, jet.
Mhm.
Girl.
Ah, good try. Jump.
Jump.
Yes, good job.
Sorry, guys, that was my impersonation of a 5-year-old, and it's a
You
bit
did it great.
rusty. Thank you. So let's see. The student is struggling with. Carlo is writing. Um,
Struggling
the
to read the words. Okay, well, is that the
yeah.
student's
Struggling
difficulty
with.
or is that the teacher's difficulty?
Could be. Let's see. Let's see more options. Let's give you guys a little bit of time because you were focused watching the video.
Ah, student struggling to remember the word. Yeah, recall for the student.
Gerald made a very good.
Vanessa, sorry, Vanessa,
Go
the
ahead.
teacher didn't emphasize the sound. Yes.
And Gerald made a very good point that the student wasn't reading, but she was actually repeating after the teacher, not paying attention to the blending or anything else. Cool.
Okay. So I think some of our teachers have got the gist of it, but they haven't found the big mistake that the teacher is making quite specifically. So should we let them in? Should we fill them in with the mistake?
I think so. If you noticed, guys, what the teacher was doing, underlining the word, yeah, and in some countries, and actually not some countries, in almost all the countries, that's sort of an invitation for that person for whom you are doing it, the invitation to read that particular word or that particular sentence. So the student was sort of forced to read, while in fact the whole point of this task was to work on blending and actually on the sound itself, j sound, nothing more than that.
Exactly. Because what level is this from, Alex?
Level 0, remember, we are
Zero.
not
So
yet forcing them to read.
our
Yeah.
student isn't able to read at this level, so we can't expect them to be able to read the words. We're just focusing on the phonic.
Exactly. I see that some of you guys already started writing in the chat what the teacher should have done. And this is amazing
Aha.
because you are literally previewing our next question. What do you think should have been done here? I see already the answer from Karen,
Yeah,
that
Karen.
the teacher should have said jacket, so kind of a point out more on
Yeah.
the
And
sound.
Liberty kind of answered it as well. She said the teacher did not encircle the letter J, so she should have encircled just the letter J, not
Mm-hmm.
underlined the word. We could have used props. Yes, Vanessa. We could have used a flashcard for letter J. Exactly.
That's cool. And flashcards, right? Awesome.
TPR, clap. Exactly, Justin. J,
Mm-hmm.
J. Exactly.
That's true. Yeah, repeating the words several times, in fact, doing modeling and then drilling is also very important, not only for the students who struggle with blending, but actually for any students learning that new sound for them, right? Is going to help.
Ah, and Gerald, have the student do air gestures of the letter J. Yeah, you can
Hmm.
start working on writing letter J in the air.
Awesome.
Great answers.
Cool, guys. Amazing. Really cool ideas. Thank you so much, guys. Awesome. I think we can also add a little bit of more ideas. Some of them will be just, restating what you have just mentioned in our chat. For example, definitely we can start with the basics. We can make sure that the student can recognize the letters. In this case, we are talking about the phonics and the written expression of it, and then focus on that mainly, because again, we are not talking about reading yet, because remember, this is level 0. And of course, drilling and repetition is our everything, especially for such lower levels, right? We are going to do this jump, jacket, in order to point out as much as possible on the sound. Retest letter recognition, that the student actually understands that this particular symbol stands for that particular sound. We can use for that, for example, whiteboard or non-picture flashcards. The only thing is that if we use whiteboard, we need to make sure that we don't write in cursive, in handwriting, but we write in like block letters, because again, not only students with dyslexia, but also any other students who are starting only learning English, it's going to be a trouble for them to learn handwritten English. Actually, to be honest, it's not only for the students learning English. I think it's any students learning any other language. When you see the handwritten form of it, it's going to be huge trouble. And of course, last but not least, remember that level 0 students will actually have all the chances in level 1 to revise all the phonics, and we are not trying to get them to read these words yet. It's more just about memorizing the phonic and the new vocabulary, sort of creating this cognitive connection between the symbol and the sound that it makes.
Great. Okay, so let's watch another video and then answer in the chat box. Can this student blend? Let's see.
Let's see. And go.
Alex, what sound? K
Kid.
Kid.
Well done.
Okay, so what do you think, guys? Can this student blend again? Sorry, my inner child is trying to show you all the colors.
Okay, Carlo says no.
Uh-huh.
Charvi,
Uh-huh.
no. Vanessa says yes. Miss Chicky,
Not
not
really.
really.
Uh-huh.
Just go for them in the middle there. Um,
Carlo made a very good point that the
ah,
student didn't read it independently, yeah?
Christine, this teacher can blend. Good point. I think
Yeah.
Christine has hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
Exactly. Unknown because the teacher did it. Exactly, Heather. Everyone is getting our point here. So no, the answer is no, that we don't know if the student can blend because the teacher did it for them. So the teacher can definitely blend, but we don't know if the student can. So well done, everyone. You got the correct answer here. So let's watch another video and then answer the same question. Can this student blend?
Let's see now and go.
D. Um, A. K.
Well done. What does it say?
Do, da, de, duck.
Duck. Good job. Okay. So Gladys was the first one to answer us, and she said, yeah. So can the student blend? We've got an overwhelming yes, yes, yes from everyone. Yes. So exactly, everyone. The answer is yes. This student can blend because the teacher is now teaching it correctly and is able to test the student's blending skills. The teacher is also giving enough wait time for the student to think of what the sound is instead of just quickly filling it in for her. So we're able to test and understand that this student can blend. Obviously, maybe needs a little bit more practice, but she did a
Absolutely.
good job. So our student in this example was able to blend. But what are some tips that we could use for our students who are struggling to blend?
Again, they might have dyslexia symptoms. They might simply have learning difficulties, right? Let's think about the situation when not everything is that bright, when they easily name the and pronounce the sound. What else can we do? Let's think.
Sadia,
Speak
speak
slowly.
slowly.
Yes. That's the first thing we can do, absolutely. Because sometimes our students can be really overwhelmed with
Yeah,
us,
or
with everything that's
sometimes
going on.
if you blend the sounds too quickly together, it merges into one sound for them and they can't actually
Hmm.
hear it as being separate sounds.
Yep,
Yeah, so
exactly.
Gerald actually just said that he sound isolation. So like just
Hmm.
saying the sound on its own. Yeah, using your fingers to then blend the letters together,
Use
showing your
TPR.
mouth.
Yeah, Adri or Adri, I'm sorry for butchering your name. Miming the sound. Yeah, that's a very cool one. Actually, it's a very good idea because, as we just mentioned, in some languages, they don't have the sounds that English has. So they sometimes might not be able to pronounce it that easily because they don't know what to do with the mouth, with the tongue, and other parts. So you will be just showing it. Awesome.
Yeah, Christine says to emphasize it with your mouth. And I think that's quite obvious on some other
Mm-hmm.
letters like the n sound or the m
Yeah.
sound, where it's very obvious if your
Or
mouth is open or closed.
yeah,
Yeah.
trace the letter good to connect to create this connection between the symbol and the sound itself. Awesome.
Wow. I think our teachers have almost said all of our solutions that we are going to give them right now. So thank you all for your fantastic answers. Let's just reiterate some of the solutions. So obviously, like you've said, we can do a lot more repetition and drilling. We can also go back to the basics and make sure they know the phonics before we start now putting them all together to blend them. We can always use flashcards to work on each individual sound to then blend them together. Use the whiteboard or our pen tool is fantastic in this situation to circle each sound that you want them to say. And obviously, always using a lot of support and praise. And then also remember that our sight words are very difficult because we don't actually ever go through the blending of these sight words. So these may take a little bit more time to get your students to be able to read them or to remember our sight words. And now that we have discussed blending, let's have a fun activity where we test our own blending skills. So this hopefully will put you in the shoes of your students who may or may not struggle to blend words. And Alex is going to be my guinea pig now.
Payback time. Got
Great.
me.
Okay, so we're going to look at some words, and I want you to read them. How do you say that?
I think it should be cove.
Cove. Good try.
Cove.
Okay, so if
Okay.
we have cove, what is this word then?
Loaf.
Good try. It's love. If we have love,
Love.
what is this word?
Okay. A clove.
Good try, but it's clove.
Okay.
And then what's this one? You've got it. Come on.
Glove.
Oh,
Glove.
good try. It's glove. One more. Okay.
Mother.
Oh, it's move. Good job, though. Well tried, Alex. So, as we can see, English is not always easy. So, let's always remember to give our students the support and the encouragement that they need.
Yeah, otherwise they will have the same type of eyes that you see in the picture and saying that, okay, I just give up. I can't do it anymore. I can't English anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, guys, we have one more video example for you. This is now more about reading comprehension. You will watch a video. Let's assume that the student has already read the text. It's, from what I remember, hypothetically level 3 student. And write the answer in the chat box. What do you think the student is struggling with? So let's see. Yeah.
Okay, Alex, how far did Harry walk to get to his hotel?
Don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, inner child is still there. Okay. Okay, so what do you think? What was the struggle for the student? Let's see, we will give you a bit of the time to write because
Dara says reading comprehension.
Mhm,
Comprehension. Comprehension. Oh, and now we've
exactly.
got a lot of words. Comprehension. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right, guys. That's for sure. We can clearly see that the student hasn't comprehended the text. Indeed, actually, reading and comprehension don't necessarily go hand in hand. When we teach our students how to blend and how to read, it doesn't mean yet that they automatically develop comprehension skills. Often they can read and sometimes even read quite fluently, quite easily, but they cannot answer any basic CCQs or follow-up questions about the text. You basically give them one task, read the text. You don't give them the task to think about what they are reading. And saying all that, thank you so much, guys, for noticing that. Let's think what we can do to help. Let's have some ideas. Let's share some ideas. I think not both of us, Tegan and me, but you guys all have noticed that you have so many students like that. What can we do?
So someone said earlier that the student might not understand the question. So that's a good point. Maybe the
Yeah.
student didn't understand the question.
Slow down in asking questions. Right. That was my first mistake as a very young teacher, very fresh teacher, thinking that if I actually ask my student more questions, they are going to be actually following, better and answering faster.
I don't know how to say this name, but Shushanik says that we could underline the part of the question or the underline the part, which we're going to chat about, underlining the relevant part. I think Heather says it as well.
That's right.
Highlight the key words. Yeah, Melvin, good point. Justin, pre-teach words, travel, distance, walk. Good point.
That's a very good idea, by the way. Pre-teaching vocabulary can always help. Right.
And we've got some people saying to skim and scan the text.
Good. And simplifying questions. Very good idea, Zaira. Yeah. Yeah, knowing and familiar words can help a lot. And I like Junie's suggestion, act out the story when it becomes more interesting, more exciting, involving for the student, also easier for them. Awesome, guys.
Great answers,
Really
everyone.
cool. Really cool. Awesome. So let's add a couple of more ideas to what you have already actually suggested. Really a lot of very cool ideas. We can definitely practice on both skimming that you have already mentioned and scanning. Scanning especially will be good for our students with troubles with reading comprehension because you can teach them how to pay attention to the keywords, key pieces of information. How we can do it? We can simply use our pen tool or any other, means that we have underlining the key information. Maybe, for example, the numbers, maybe some special words like action verbs in the sentence or whatever. Or what you also have already mentioned, pre-teaching some vocabulary. It also helps them to get more familiar with the story and get more involved. And definitely good old eliciting. Before we start even with anything, we can ask them some questions to kind of bring them to the text and see what they actually know. And last but not least, we can start with also what you have mentioned with some simple follow-up questions. Sometimes what we can do, we can just pay attention to like pieces of the text, put it into chunks, and then start with the first one so that the student knows, let's say, where to look, how to look for that particular information in the text, because sometimes they simply are not aware how to get the information from the text. It's harder for them, so we can help them with that.
Yeah. So thank you so much for all your great ideas, everyone. Um, to just summarize now, let's go over some practical examples that we can use in our online classroom. So firstly, let's look at what we call dyslexia-friendly fonts. So on our slide, we can see on the left-hand side, we have got the word hello. And then on the right-hand side, we've also got the word hello. But which is easier to read, the one on the left or the one on the right?
On the right is
Much.
definitely very fancy, but not sure
It's
easy. Yeah.
it's fancy and it's very pretty, but it's
Hmm.
definitely not the one that is easier to read. Exactly, guys. Yeah, it's the one on the left. So it's very clear that our plain fonts are much easier to read. And that is why NovaKid already uses dyslexia-friendly fonts, and all of their curriculum is very dyslexia friendly and only uses these plain fonts. Also, as Alex has already mentioned, when you are writing, whether it's on the whiteboard in class or on a physical whiteboard, always remember to write in plain text and not in cursive.
That's true, because they are going to definitely struggle with that. Then we also have time accommodation. The first tip is definitely don't rush, yeah, because children with dyslexia require more time to read and comprehend, and therefore we can consider sometimes dividing up longer lessons and setting a redo. Of course, it's very case specific, not necessarily it has to be done in every lesson with any child displaying any reading or blending or reading comprehension troubles, but we can keep it in mind. Also, another thing is that we shouldn't force into only reading tasks. We can work through the content slowly and ensure understanding than just rushing the child from one task to another. Sometimes maybe also can be a good idea just skipping some tasks and focusing on the most important or most challenging thing for your student. So you can feel free to actually cater for the student's needs rather than just to teach the material. Remember, we always say we teach the student, not the material. Material is just a helping hand. Yeah, the student is the most important one.
Exactly. We can also look at chunking. So, chunking is a strategy that we use to break up larger pieces of information into smaller, more bite sized pieces, which is especially important when we are doing reading comprehension. So, for example, like when we had Harry, we could have broken up that whole long paragraph into smaller sections, gotten him to or her to read 2 or 3 sentences, answer a CCQ or a follow-up question about just those 2 or 3 sentences, and then move on to the next 2 or 3 sentences and do it that way to ensure more comprehension of the reading than just reading plain text.
Cool. Thank you so much, Tegan. I just noticed that our guys in the chat were answering our question about which font was easier to read, and all of them are writing left, left, guys. You're
Exactly.
amazing. You are really cool. Super.
Yeah.
Really cool. Yeah, the next tip that we can share, actually, that's something what we have already mentioned and what you have mentioned multiple times in our chat box, definitely scanning, because it does help our students to not just focus on key information, in fact, locate the key information, because that's usually the biggest trouble. Because what they sometimes see, they just see all these words that don't make any, meaning for them. Even in the sentence, it's hard for them sometimes to understand the entire sentence. So our job here is to help them actually identify those key ones that they can pay attention to, and then use them as anchors to get the idea of the sentence and then of the text as a whole. So here definitely we can underline, if your text is lucky to have numbers, we can underline those numbers and start with them. Or maybe you have some special, let's say, names, or maybe special types of grammar structure. So you can use it not only to develop the reading comprehension, but also practice the grammar as well. No problems whatsoever. And then you can just adjust your follow-up questions for them to look for that specific information. And last but not least,
Yeah, we have our multi-sensory approach. So this is highly effective for our dyslexic students because it engages multiple senses, our visual, auditory, tactile, and kinesthetic, to reinforce the language learning. So some examples of this would be for the visual system. We can obviously use our beautiful flashcards. The ones with pictures will be easier. If we turn it around and just have the symbol, it will be a little bit more tricky. We can then also look at color coding using the wonderful pen tool that we have in our platform to underline, to circle, etc. For auditory, we obviously can listen and repeat. We use songs and rhymes for all of our grammar rules. And we also do a lot of drilling and chanting activities, which will help. For our tactile or kinesthetic system, we can make use of the whiteboard, whether it's in the classroom or physically. We can draw in the air, we can use finger correction, and then, of course, a lot of TPR. And then for a combined approach, we can also do things like matching the spoken word with pictures and actions. So, for example, saying the word jump, showing a picture of someone jumping, and then actually physically jumping with the student.
cool. Thank you so much, Tegan. I actually love the synergy today in our session, because some of the teachers in our chat mentioned earlier that one of the obstacles for the students to grasp reading and blending and even going for reading comprehension is the difference in learning styles. So definitely when we are adjusting our teaching style towards the learning style is definitely going to help them way more. Super. Thank you so much, guys. And to sum everything up, in fact, actually, we all will agree, even those who are native speakers and those who are non-native speakers, that reading in English is difficult, especially for second language learners. Why it is like that? For those of you who know it, sorry for repeating it once again, but in fact, actually, English is influenced, has been influenced by many languages. Imagine up to 75%, it's literally three-fourths of the language. 75% of English words were actually borrowed from other languages. They came from those languages with their own spelling, pronunciation rules, sometimes grammar rules and stuff. That's why it's so hard for us to actually learn and to grasp all these many exceptions. Yeah, that's the reason why English does have so many rules and even more exceptions, and that's why reading difficulties not necessarily always mean dyslexia. That's why we always have to remember that we don't diagnose our students. We can definitely identify the difficulties. We can adapt our teaching strategies accordingly, no matter if they are actually dyslexic or having some, reading difficulties. And NovaKid content, great thing, and curriculum is already very dyslexia friendly, so you can use it to your advantage. And of course, definitely use strategies based on difficulties seen in the classroom for sure. And basically, guys, that's all for today. Now we are going to be very happy to answer your questions that you have been leaving in the chat box so far. And let's see, we have actually quite a lot of them here.
Okay, so Alistair asks, can we ask if a student has dyslexia? Alex.
I believe we shouldn't ask about it. Ideal situation when you are approached by the parents who openly tell you that this child has dyslexia and ask you for, adjusting your teaching style towards the troubles that the student have. But we shouldn't ask them, even if they are old enough to understand and old enough not to get offended. Let's not
It's
do that.
definitely not something we ask, yeah. And remember,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it is just a label. And what difference is that label going to make? You are, as the teacher, going to identify the difficulties the student is struggling with in your lesson, and you're going to hopefully adapt your teaching style and the teaching materials to suit your specific student's needs.
Absolutely. Then we have
Okay.
Hey Ren asking us what slashes work for reading comprehension. Would slashes, sorry. Uh, would slashes work for reading comprehension to help learners with pace and pronunciation? Hmm.
I'm assuming they're meaning like the forward slash and the backslash. Is that what they're meaning?
If we are talking here about chunking, right, and like dividing the pieces of text, or sometimes dividing the words into some pieces, like decoding them.
Yeah, okay. Maybe they're meaning like so that you can break up the sentences and you put a slash from the beginning to the end as to where they need to start reading and to stop, maybe.
And this might even help with developing scanning skills or even skimming skills, because sometimes your students get, you notice it many times, most probably, sometimes your students get anxious and confused when they see like a big text on the slide and like, okay, I don't want to read that. It's too big, it's too scary. But if you actually put slashes, like, okay, we are not going to read everything. Of course, you will read everything, but later, yeah, one piece at a time. But you just put slashes for, let's say, first paragraph, yeah, and then you work only with that one, reading it, asking questions, maybe if needed, pre-teaching vocabulary, and then you proceed to the next one. So you just break it one by one.
I see we have Sarah or Sarah, um, who has students who struggle in blending letter b or d. I'm assuming she's also meaning maybe identifying letter b and d because that's often a struggle. Um, Before we carry on, just a reminder to everyone to please go and click the link that Lisa has sent in our chat box if you need to leave so that you can fill in our feedback form and get your certificate. Okay, so even our native English speakers struggle with understanding b and d. And actually, I don't know if it's the same in all other countries, but in South Africa, it's actually acceptable for a child to reverse and struggle to identify b and d all the way until the end of grade 1. So that's 7 years old. So it is a tricky thing for even our native learners to understand. And all you can do is try and reinforce that as much as possible with using all the tips we have already discussed, drawing it in the air, doing it on the flashboard, using props and flashcards and things like that.
Absolutely. When you add more, teaching aids, for example, something that can help them connect, because why they have a problem with it? Because for them, it's like it kind of looks alike. But once they can create this cognitive connection between the sound, how it sounds between the symbol and the image, is going to be way easier for them to remember. Like ball and doll definitely is going to be very easy for them to identify b and do, because these are going to be two different, toys. It's going to be way easier.
So
Let's.
Alistair had a question, and I think he then answered his own question. So he said his student is extremely slow and he can't understand why they are so slow. But then he said having dyslexia would explain why. If the student has a problem, we can then adjust our teaching style. Exactly. That's the point of our webinar. So exactly, Alistair. So it doesn't matter if they do or if they don't have dyslexia. If you don't know if they have the label on it, you have identified that they are having some difficulties and they are a slower learner than others. You then adjust your teaching style to fit that student.
Absolutely. Sometimes it can be some outside factors that are influencing the student. As we have already mentioned in our chat, sometimes can be time of the day when they are having their lesson. Maybe something else happened before the lesson that affects their mood, their behavior, and maybe sometimes even their physical condition, right? It also can affect a lot.
Mm. Okay, Alex, I've got one for you. My student has a tough time pronouncing. So Lady Anne says, my student has a tough time pronouncing or saying a word, even though I've played the audio 3 times and let him repeat the sound very slowly. What is the best thing to do to help him? He's 10.
Here, actually, the only the only solution most probably is going to be repetition and drilling as much as you can, doing it in all the funny ways. Because why sometimes we avoid drilling and why our students think that it's a boring activity, because it's actually a boring activity. Yeah, but we can do something to make it more exciting. Maybe we can change our voice. We can do t t t. We can start whispering, and it's weird and creepy. Definitely, your student will pay attention to and will want to say it after you. Maybe you can pick like a character and then sort of say it together with that character and encourage your student to do so. Or sometimes, simply as we mentioned, maybe in the mother tongue of your student, there is no such sound. That you are trying to drill. So if you keep repeating, or maybe get yourself closer to the camera and show how this sound is made, it's going to be way easier for your student, because
Yeah.
sometimes we actually have helping hand from the parents who also mispronounce that sound, and the student just simply repeats after the parents. So sometimes you might coach both of them, the parent and the child, in your lesson.
I think also have to remember that it's okay if they are not doing it correctly after the first lesson of learning
Yeah.
that sound. That is why there's so much repetition in the curriculum, is because
Mm-hmm.
by the end of that unit or section, they then will understand it. We don't
Yeah.
expect them to know it after the first time we introduce it. Okay, we have Stephanie, who
Who says, how do you deal with the students who always try to read despite pronouncing the words wrongly, but are reluctant to take corrections? That's actually a very good question. Like they already sort of mastered, as they think, yeah, reading skills. They
mm,
boom, read it quickly and thinking that they can now go to the next slide.
yeah, so I think that's common.
Absolutely. Tegan, what do you
I
think we can do here? Any ideas?
Sorry, I'm just checking my internet connection is stable because I I think I was a minute behind there. But no, so I think if your student is reluctant to take corrections, you maybe need to adapt the way you are giving the corrections, or correcting their um mispronunciation. Um, what do you think, Alex?
Or sometimes we can kind of puzzle our students with changing the way how we proceed to the task, because what they usually expect that we go to this reading slide and we ask them to read the entire text. What if before going to the reading slide, we can go for, let's say, a blank page and pre-teach certain, certain words. Not necessarily it has to be the new vocabulary, but maybe something important for that particular text, and practice to pronounce those words properly. And then we go to the text so the student more clearly, hopefully, understands what's going on. And again, breaking it into pieces. I think our platform allows us not only to write on the slide, but also to create like geometrical, shapes, right? So we can actually cover, for example, part of the text and just show to the student only first part of the text, so that they wouldn't get too, excited and rush into reading the entire text. Just to focus our attention on the first piece, ask them to read, work with that piece, and then slowly, bit by bit, open the rest of the text. It will be
Yeah,
actually easier.
it would be if we had that. We could always just scribble it out with a pen tool if
Yeah,
we because we don't have a
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then another point on that one is that you could take their place. So you could say the sentence and mispronounce the word, and then say it again and pronounce the word and say, which one sounds better? And then you get them to correct you as the teacher. So trading places like that is often a great way to try and work on your error correction. Okay. And lastly, we have Franchetti. How many times do we have to repeat the words which the student can't pronounce well before moving forward?
That's a
So
very good question, actually.
there is no specific amount of times that you need to repeat something before moving forward. Like we just said, it doesn't necessarily mean that your student has to perfectly pronounce the sound or the word after the first time you have introduced it. There will be lots more room for repetition in further lessons to come.
An important thing about repetition and drilling, as we also have already mentioned, we need to remember about sort of making it animated and making it fun for the student. We are not talking here, guys, about doing some kind of a circus thing in each and every lesson of yours with younger learners. But when you modulate your voice, when you change the tone of it, the pitch of it, sometimes it does help them even to hear the sound differently. It does make it more interesting for them. So it's becoming way easier for them to follow. And again, not necessarily it has to be done properly from the word go. You will have to repeat it this time, next time, maybe 5 lessons later, still you will have to do that. It's normal. It's nothing wrong with you or the student. It's just the learning curve.
And sometimes you can maybe take a break from that specific sound within the lesson, do something else, and then come back to it. So it's not so repetitive within that
Yep,
moment.
absolutely.
Guys, we have so many more questions that we would love to answer, but unfortunately, we have run out of time. So if there's anything that you still want answered, please leave your question in the feedback form, and Lisa will have a wonderful post-webinar article that will be posted on our teacher portal, and all your questions will definitely be resolved there.
Thank you so much for your active participation. Without you, it wouldn't be such a cool session that we had today because you were participating so actively in each and every activity and sharing your ideas, even meanwhile when we are sharing ours. That's so cool. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, we've had such a great time with you all tonight, or today, or this morning, whatever time it is in your country. So
Or
thank you so
lunchtime,
much. Or
or
lunchtime.
Merlin.
We hope you have all enjoyed our session today and taken something from it that you can use in your classrooms. Thank you all.
Thank you so
Bye
much,
bye.
guys. Bye. See you next time. And happy coming
Bye.
holiday.